Okay, looks all good. Hello, Elkan, how are you?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good. We were just both having a little discussion in the background there in the studio before we came live about this always connected world that we are in, and I was debating turning back on some of my notifications that I've turned off over the last year to actually help me keep up to date and keep up with conversations I'm having with people. But I don't know if I want to turn back on my notifications. So that's the debate we've been having. Notifications on or off on your communication apps and social media apps. Let us know what you like to do. um, but thanks for joining. I can see a few people joining in now, so that's great. I will share something on Twitter as well when we get started. But I just wanted to quickly say before I hand over to Elkin that our Cloud Lunch and Learn marathon event will be happening in May the 13th. It's actually my birthday. We'll be having a 24-hour global event with actually multiple language tracks, which is super exciting. And the call for speakers is open. And in fact, it's open for the next 7 days, I believe. It closes on the 31st of this month, so the 31st of March. So if you have an idea for a talk, a lightning talk, a workshop, there's options to submit both live and recorded sessions. Please do check out our website. So cloudlunchlearn.com/marathon. I'll put the link in the chat as well. And yeah, look forward to seeing those last minute submissions come in for the marathon event. But with that, we will hand over to Elkin, who's going to take us through getting started with data transformation services in Azure. And I'm looking forward to this one. Alcom was telling me a little bit about it before. So yeah, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are joining from. My name is Elhan. Uh, I'm very glad that you are having time, dedicating time to join our session today. Thank you, everyone, to be here. Uh, so last time in our session, we talked about how to start with data engineering and what type of certifications and upskilling opportunities exist with Microsoft Azure Data. Today, we are going to focus on data transformation services. And before diving into the session, I want to share a little bit about myself. So, my name is Elhan. You can shortly call me El. I'm a principal cloud architect for the company called Terex Solutions. We will talk about that a little bit later. I'm a Microsoft certified for several years, and I had a privilege to work on different enterprise healthcare systems. And in the last couple of years, I was working on cloud solutions and healthcare data API standards. I'm also involved with Microsoft Tech Community, and I like to talk and teach about Azure. That's my passion. In addition to that, I'm also frequent speaker on different tech meetup events, and I run my own blog called The Cloud Marathoner, and I explain there why I choose this name, and you are more than welcome to check that up. And if you want to connect with me, here are the details on a Twitter or on a LinkedIn or a GitHub repo where you can look into the code samples that we are going to demo today. All right, that's it. So what you see is a T-Rex solution. I work for this company. It's a mid-sized company and very good place to grow your career and do interesting work. Mainly, we are specialized in serving our government and federal civilian agency customers, with US Census being the largest customer, where our team did an excellent job in executing US 2020 census with our partners. And T-Rex is actually have many partners that we are proudly doing business with, and we are number 4 provider of cloud services to the federal government. Okay, and of course, check our open position and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. All right, now let's dive into the session. So let's speak about what we are going to cover today. And at any time, if you have any questions or want to ask anything, just drop a message on a chat and we will return back to you. So what we will cover today? First, we will start with Azure Data Factory concepts, what it is, and what is that ADF is doing special that we need to give our time and attention. Then we'll look into the pipelines and activities that are embedded inside the ADF. Then we'll look into the linked services and how it can be used. We'll continue with data sets. Then we'll look into how to execute your pipelines, what type of monitoring you can do there, and can you do any triggers or scheduling, how it can be done. And finally, we'll look into data flows and data transformations. Along the way, we'll investigate inner workings and fundamentals of cloud-based ETL, which stands for extract transformation load, and data integration services that allows you to create data-driven workflow for orchestrating data movement and transforming data at scale. All right. I hope you are. It sounds good for you, and let's move on. But before putting a, before saying let's start doing this, let's also consider what are not going to be covered, what I'm not going to cover in this presentation. Because of the limitation of time, we will not look into the integration with third-party services, even though it's very, very possible with ADF. We will not have time to look into CI/CD in pipelines, meaning putting your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline to make sure that you can move your pipelines between different environments where you want to deliver the value. Then we will not consider ADF support external activities. We will not deep dive into integration runtimes, even though I will show you some snippets of that. And we would not touch any advanced topics. However, at the end, again, we'll conclude our session with ADF demo and Q&A, where you can ask certain questions. Okay. All right. That said, I want to start with a very important question. And that question is, what is ADF? What is Azure Data Factory and why we need that? Where it is coming from? Okay. So in this graphic, you can see, the full potential that this service can provide to you. But in a nutshell, if you kind of want to say one word about ADF, it will stand for orchestrating data. So in a real world, every project requires data and some type of analytics. There is a need to trigger the batch movement of data or to set up a regular schedule as a requirement for most analytical solutions. With ADF and its services, you can be with Azure Data Factory. It will provide you service that can be used to fulfill such requirements and perform your ETL and ELT workloads. So Azure Data Factory provides a cloud-based data integration service that orchestrates the movement and transformation of data between various different data stores and compute resources. So in this graphic, if you look at it, you will see that on the left side, we have the data sources. We have relational data source, we have non-relational data source. Let me make sure I can move here. As you may see, it's the relational data source. It can stand for, your SQL Server database, or it can be your any other CRM or ERP related database. And you may also connect to non-relational databases for the source of data. Once you have this source of data, using this Azure data, using the orchestration data pipelines, you can actually make data processing and movement of those data. And once they are all processed and you had your initial activities on this data, then you can actually move this data and have your visualization done on any BI tool that actually can accept those data sets. You can perform some advanced analytics, and you can actually use that on any language, meaning that there's a multitude of supported languages that you can use. And the beauty of ADF, it is not just for cloud. you can use ADF to connect your on-prem services. What it just needs is it because ADF comes with more than 100 integration services that you can connect even like to the AWS, Google Cloud, and other providers and get the data from that sources. Like for example, there's a connector to get data from AWS S3 buckets. All right, that's it. Let's look into the top concepts in Azure Data Factory that you would need to know in order to be able to have at least this high level understanding what you can do and accomplish with data transformation services on Azure Data Factory. All right. So first we will start with the pipelines, as we already mentioned that. So what's a pipeline? So in a nutshell, pipeline is a concept that actually where you build your activities. A data factory might have one or more pipelines, and a pipeline is a logical grouping of activities that performs a unit of work. Together, the activities in pipeline perform a task. For example, they can contain a group of activities that ingest data from Azure Blob, and then you can run a Hive query on HD inside cluster to partition that data. So we mentioned the activity. So what is activity in the concept of ADF? Activities represent a processing step in a pipeline. For example, you might use a copy activity to copy data from one data store to another data store. Next is datasets. The concept of datasets in ADF represents data structures with the data within the data store, which simply point to our reference, which simply point to or reference the data you want to use in your activities as inputs or outputs. So basically, it's a set of data. Linked services. So linked services are much like connection strings, where you want to connect and get the data, or you want to ingest that data from different sources. And these linked services define the connection information that is needed for Data Factory to connect to external resources. Then we have data flows, and to, to to create and manage graphs of data transformation logic that you can use to transform any size data. You can use this for that reasons. ADF will execute your logic on a Spark cluster that spins up and spins down when you need it. You wouldn't ever have to manage or maintain clusters. And mapping data flows are the ones where you can do those transformation logics. And finally, we have integration runtimes. An integration runtime is the compute infrastructure used by ADF to provide data integration capabilities across different network environments. Oh, it sounds like there's a lot of concepts here and it may sound a little bit confusing to you, but to simplify that concepts, I would rather look into relationship between these components so that we can have a little bit better understanding what what is included inside ADF or what concepts are coming inside ADF and inside ADF and why. So speaking about the relationships between ADF components, this graph actually simplifies it and provides clarity. Here, as you may remember, we mentioned pipelines. So pipelines are something that you should always provision on your ADF. Without pipelines, you wouldn't have any, activity that's running. So first we provision the first we provision the pipelines, and it's a logical grouping of activities as we mentioned priorly. So once we have our activities, those activities needs to be executed. They needs to be run. And to run those activities, you can either get the data from datasets and have it, or you can took those datasets and run them on a linked service. For example, you can get those data and run on a Hadoop cluster and get your, outputs. So that said, I wanna. Okay, Okay, I'm going to switch to a small video, and I hope everyone can hear that. It's going to be a good introduction from Microsoft ADF team to visualize all these understanding and concepts I just mentioned in a more uh, streamlined way. Let's listen to that. And Lisa, can you hear the music or sound?
Yes, I can hear.
It's working good. Okay. Okay, let's look what's Azure Data Factory components and how they are playing nicely with each other.
Understanding the components that are used within Azure Data Factory will enable you to easily create cloud-based data integration solutions. One of the first components you will create is a linked service. These are much like connection strings, which define the connection information needed for Data Factory to connect to external resources, such as Azure Data Lake Store or Azure Databricks. With this defined, you can then create datasets, which is a named view of data that simply points or references the data within a linked service. Data typically flows from the datasets within a linked service into activities. Activities enable you to perform an action on the data, such as copying the data or using the data in a compute resource. You can have one activity, but it is typical that you perform multiple activities on the data. These are grouped together in a component known as a pipeline. The pipeline allows you to manage the activities as a set, instead of each one individually. You deploy and schedule the pipeline, instead of the activities independently. You can dynamically update components, such as linked services at runtime, by adding parameters to give you the flexibility of using the same solution in multiple environments. In addition, the integration runtime component provides the compute infrastructure used by Azure Data Factory. It is referenced by the linked service or activity and provides the compute environment as close as possible to the target data store or compute service while meeting security and compliance needs. When authorizing Azure Data Factory solutions, you can make use of control flow components to control the flow of activities within the solution. Not all the components are necessarily required, but by understanding them, you can pick the best ones to build your cloud-based data integration solution.
Okay,
Hey,
I switched back. I was on a mute. Yeah.
yes,
So we
no worries.
switched back now to the slide where we left. So what we were talking about is we talked about the components that are essential part of any ADF pipeline. And as you saw on the demo, on a small video clip, activities are managed as a group, as a set, and there are linked services and datasets that are involved into this equation as well. Okay, that said, let's now look a little bit higher level picture of what we just explained, and let's look into what ADF does. So it has these components. So what ADF, the Azure Data Factory service does for you, so that you need to have an you need to know that you can use this tool whenever you need. First of all, it's a data driven workflow. The pipelines, data driven workflows in Azure Data Factory typically perform the following four steps. So what are the steps? They are connect and collect. Basically, the first step in building an orchestrating system is to define and connect all the required sources of data together, such as databases, file shares, and FTP web services. The next step is to ingest the data as needed to the centralized location for subsequent processing. After that, we have transform and enrich, which happens on the step where compute services such as Databricks and machine learning can be used to prepare or produce transform data on a maintainable and controlled schedule to feed production environments with cleansed and transformed data. In some instances, you may even augment the source data with additional data to aid analysis or consolidate it through a normalization process to be used in a machine learning experiment as an example. Finally, once we transform this data, we have a publish step. After the raw data has been refined into a business-ready consumable form from the transform and enrich phase, we can now load the data into Azure Data Warehouse, which is Azure Synapse Analytics. It's a new name. Or we can use Azure SQL Database or Azure Cosmos DB or whichever analytic engine your business users can point to from their business intelligence tools. Okay, because once we have this data published, any tool, any BI tool can consume that data. And finally, very important part of this ADF pipeline is monitoring. Azure Data Factory has built-in support for pipeline monitoring via Azure Monitor API, PowerShell, Azure Monitor logs, and health plans on Azure portal to monitor the scheduled activities and pipelines for success and failure rates. Okay, all this sounds good, but it would be even better if we dive into the demos and have a look into actual implementation of this so that we can see the benefits of Azure Data Factory service. And that's it. Next one is going to be a demo. So we are going to, before we will switch to have our first demo on data copy activity. Lisa, do we have any questions, any comments from the studio?
No questions or comments yet. So anyone, if you do have questions, please pop them in the chat and we will stop again and we can take any questions. So if you do have some, pop them in the chat.
Okay. Before moving further, I wanted to mention that there are like different data connectors. Okay, I also already mentioned that. But if you wanna have a reference for that, and let me talk about that now. Actually, in this demo one, what we are going to do is we will create a data factory by using the Azure Data Factory user interface, and we want our pipeline. And with this demo, we want our pipeline to copy data from Azure Blob Storage to a database in Azure SQL. And we can easily use and enhance this configuration pattern in the demo and apply to copying from a file-based data store to a relational data store. And in terms of supported data stores, there are a number of supported data stores that we can use. And I will share the link for the article on Microsoft Docs, where you can actually deep dive into details about what are the supported data stores you can use. Okay, so that said, let's switch on my browser where we have Azure environment ready. So here it is. So where we are now is, let me make it bigger. Okay, is it easily visible? Can everybody see my screen? I hope it is. So where I am now is, let me show you the resource group. In my Azure subscription, I have already configured a resource group called Cloud Launch and Learn Demo. So I'm going to navigate there. And within the subscriptions, as you may see, I already have a number of resource provision. I have 2 data factories, I have a SQL server, I have a storage account. So for this demo, first demo of copy activities, I'm going to use this manually provisioned ADF, Azure Data Factory v2. And I'm also going to use the storage account 22, which is done here. And plus, I'm going to use the SQL server, which is provisioned here, okay? In order to show how we can move data from blob storage into the SQL server. All right, that's the purpose. And to do that, what we need to do is we need to create a pipeline. So this is the copy pipeline that I have here. And if I close everything here, just to make sure that you are more or less get familiar with this environment. First of all, I'm actually using a GitHub, meaning that I'm version controlling my changes on a GitHub, and I have different branches there. Secondly, if you want to configure this Git branch, I will show later in the demo how you can do that. But when we look into our ADF solution, Data Factory solution, we have a one pipeline here. We have two data sets, okay? And let's look first dive into the pipeline, see what we have here. So I'm going to open this pipeline. All right, let's make it a little bigger here. All right, so within this pipeline, once I click on this pipeline, you would see that it actually has a number of properties under it. It has name under the general. It has the name that's defined here, copy from blob to SQL. Okay, so it has a timeout defined. It has a retry interval for the cases if you know that the pipeline fails, so when it can retry. So as a source, let me make it bigger. Here, you may see that I have a source from blob dataset. And if I open it, click on open, you will see that it's actually getting the, it has a linked service. And this linked service is to the Azure Storage linked service. And if I open that, you will see that I'm actually linked to the Azure storage account, which I just mentioned, okay, from where it's retrieving the information. And you can test connection by clicking on test connection. This is how you can create, let's say, if you want to create a new connection, and here are the different types where you can connect. Make it bigger here. As you may see, as a connection type, to retrieve the data. We have different ways. You can get it from Azure Data Lake, from Azure File Storage, FTP, Google Cloud Storage, HDFS, and there are many more. Okay, if you scroll down, you would see that there's of course Amazon S3 buckets. So once you define those, first you would need to give a name, then you define your type where you want to connect. Let's say it's Azure Data Lake Storage 2. Then you need to define the connect via integration runtime. Here, if you don't have one, you can create by clicking on new. And this is the runtime. Basically, it's when it says runtime, it refers to the Spark clusters that's going to spin each time pipeline execution actually requested. And this is an ephemeral clusters, meaning they are short-lived clusters where short could be anything from less than an hour to a month or so. Okay, so that's what it means. And for them to be effective, all this should be stateless and immutable. All right, at least in the terms of their own configuration. All right, so then we define the way how we want to connect. Managed identity is a preferred way if you are doing that for production and you have to set it up. However, for demo purposes, you can use account keys and service principal. Anyway, so this is the way what I just did. I showed you how you can create your own linked service, and so once it is created, we should verify that it's working, and for that reason, test connection can help you there. So connection successful. Here, as you remember, if you don't know by heart or you don't know for sure what's the container name from where you want to retrieve your data in blob storage, you can actually click on this browse and navigate within that linked storage service to the exact file from where you want to retrieve. And what is inside this EMP text file? Actually, inside that file, let me show you ADF tutorial. So inside this file, now I switch to the Azure where I have this storage. So as you may see here, inside this file, we have a comma delimited information about first name, last name, list of the people, and we have 4 rows here. If we exclude the first one as a header row, we have like John Doe, we have Mike, Nina, and John Wu. All right. So what? Let's close this now and switch back to our. I'm switching back to the ADF now. So here, once this defined, we need to make sure that it's very important. We need to make sure that we define first row as a header. Otherwise, this pipeline wouldn't know how to map from your text file into the table. Okay, so this is the schema where we define the first part, which is the source. We define the source as a blob data set, and we defined it within given, we pointed it to the file emp.txt. So what is the sink? So within the sink, you would define output, where you want that data flow to go. And in our case here, if I open this output SQL dataset, you would see that it's actually linked to a SQL database, all right? And it's going to be, it is linked to a table called db.emp, all right? So this is the table where it should go. And momentarily, I'm going to show you that table, what's inside that table, by connecting through a familiar tool called SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. And what is inside this connection? If you click, just to be sure, I'll click on edit, and you will see that it's actually a connection to the SQL Server called Cloud Launch and Learn SQL Main. This is the URL for that, right? Database windows.net. And then I have a database, my cloud launch and learn demo, where we'll get connected. And then there's a table that we define dbo empty. So here I need to click on test connection just to be sure. And here it is. It's successfully validate that everything is connected and working. And if you want to preview data currently on this database, you can click on this preview data link over here. And what we currently have, we actually have some data there. And for the presentation purpose, I'm going to go and delete all those data. And to do that, I'm going to make sure that I can bring my SQL Server Management Studio. I hope everybody can see that. So where I am now is, oops, let me try to zoom again. So I'm connected to that same instance that I just showed you, Cloud Launch and Learn SQL main.database windows.net. And now using the familiar tool, I'm going to navigate to the database where I have my table, my Cloud Launch and Learn demo table, where the data is going to be moved from my blob storage. So if I run the select statement on this, let's make sure that, yeah, it is. Let's try to run this statement. And we see that there's a 12, rows in that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to comment that, and I'm going to empty it out to make sure that, we start with no rows in that table. It's empty. So I'm going to execute that. Okay, it succeeded. So there should be no data anymore. And I'm going to rerun the same query again. So as you may see, now we have 0. It is returned 0. So there is no columns in that table. We truncated the table, meaning that now we can go back. And just to prove the point, I'm going to refresh everything here, test the connection, and then preview data. So as you see, there's no data left, right? Because we just went and made sure that it is cleaned up. All right. Now I'm going to close this because our connection to sync is ready. And what is going to happen is that in the mapping, we didn't define any schema, as you may see here. So if we want to have a one-to-one mapping from our initial blob file into the table, we don't need to add any new file. So ADF behind the scene will map them based on the column names that's retrieving from the source file and insert them into table. So in the settings, you may define some more fault tolerance and other degree of parallelism. Other like you can enable the logging and staging, and of course, and that's what you need. So now let's see how we can test this pipeline, how we can know what's working. First of all, in order to test this, let's execute that, validate that everything is working fine. For that reason, I'm going to click on validate. Okay, and everything fine. So let's debug this. So while debugging this pipeline, you would see that here an output appears here in the bottom and say it's queued. So why it's saying it's queued, it's preparing basically the runtime to go and run this pipeline on a debug mode. And let's wait for this to succeed. Here it is. It succeeded in 5 minutes, 5 seconds. Sorry, as you may see here, duration was 5 seconds, and it succeeded. So now, how we can see these results? How we can monitor that everything actually worked fine? To do that, we need to switch on. We need to navigate to the left, and here you may see that we have a monitoring feature, right? Tab. So I'm going to click on that monitoring. And here, once we are in monitoring, on the top, you may see we have a toggle here between debug and triggered. And if you click on debug, we can see, all the things that we should see. We should see the one that we just ran. This is my local time here in Eastern Zone, US East, and sounds pretty good because that's what we did as a debug. And once we did the debug, it succeeded. So if now what we want to do is we would like to go back to our SQL Server. Okay, here I'm switching back to the SQL Server Management Studio, refresh it and run the query. Okay, so let's run this query and see what happens. So we have 4 new rows, and if we actually look inside these rows, we'll see that it's actually have all these 4 people, inserted by the ID, first name, and last name. Everything is inserted into our table called into our database and table called emp.dbo.emp. Okay, so all are went to the right place using our copy pipeline. So what we did, we just copied we copied the blob content of the blob file into a table in Azure SQL. Now, it's not just this. So in addition to monitoring, I would like to show you how you can automate that and trigger that through scheduler. So to do that, we have an option of trigger here. This is the trigger that we need to look into. So here, once we click on a trigger, we can see that I already set it up one. But if you want to set one from the beginning, from scratch, you just need to say that, just click on a new, and then you click on a new here, and then you set the new. You can set the name like new trigger every 5 minutes, for example, and then you need to define the schedule. How you want that? Do you want that to be on a storage event, or you want that to be custom? The way how you want to define that. And after that, you define the start date and end date when you want that to be finished. So I have already created a schedule, but that schedule is to run every minute for the purpose of our demo. And as it says run every minute. It's based on a schedule. So I need to put the time here, which needs to be a time defined. So in my case, it needs to be after 2 p.m. 2:42. Let's put that time here, 2:42 p.m. And let's run that for 3 minutes, because each time your pipeline executes, you are going to be charged for that. And here I'm going to put the time as 2:43. Where is that? 43 p.m. Okay. And then I need to click on OK and save it. So once we save that, the important thing here is to publish that. If you don't publish this, your trigger would not kick out. So I'm publishing this pipeline to make sure that everything is actually set it up correct. So it's publishing the pipeline now. Publish completed. So because our trigger is publishing, the trigger is completed, it's setting, and we have this integration with the GitHub. It's actually also generating all the artifacts that are required for that change and saving them into the GitHub. Speaking about the GitHub, but before going to the GitHub, I want to switch on a monitor and look into the triggered ones. And let's refresh this. And as you may see, this is the one that just triggered, because if you look at the timestamp here, it's saying 2:42 p.m., which is the current time. And because it was, and it's actually triggered and finished. And when we scroll on the right, you will see that it's a run every minute. This is the name of the trigger. If you remember, we just configured and we activated that. And this is the manually triggered, meaning that we triggered, manually. And this is the other times when this trigger has been, activated. So in our case, the important part here is this latest one where our configured, where we actually configure the trigger and that run and it succeeded, and says that the trigger name is run every minute. Okay, so this way we actually use the trigger, and we looked also that monitoring, where it will show that if whenever you are debugging and it's a manual trigger, it's also going to be recorded here under the monitoring tab. Okay, right. That said, I'm going to go back to the pipeline, our copy data activity, and this time, while we valid, so I want to show you something here. It's a bit hidden here. It's not that easily, but once you are validating your pipeline, you may actually look into your input, output, and as well as the details of the job. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look into the input. This is the input. It's a delimited text reading from the file. Okay. And this is our output, which is going to be the table. This is the basically JSON representation of the reads and what happened. And as an output details, everything appears here. This is a nice representation of the job, what actually happened. We have a blob storage, which moved 4 rows into the Azure SQL table, and all the queues and information about this operation has been listed here. Okay, and here I want you to give to look into this information. It's too big, but if you look at this DIU, it actually stands for the unit. It stands for the unit which is called a data integration unit. It's a measure that represents the power of a single. This DIU stands for the data integration unit, and it represents the power of a single unit in Azure Data Factory. And the power is a combination of CPU. The power of DIU is actually it's a combination of CPU, memory, and network resources allocated in order to be able to run this data integration unit to give that one unit, and you can read about that if you navigate here. Okay, so what we did, just to recap, we looked into pipeline that has a source that's getting from the blob storage, and it's a CSV file that we actually map to our output SQL database here. Okay, and then by executing the pipeline or putting a trigger, we are able to move the data from blob storage into Azure SQL tables. All right, so this is the first demo. Any questions on that from studio? This finalized the first demo.
Hey, no questions on the demo. We did have a general question about whether Azure Data Factory is data ingestion or data transformation tool, or both.
It's both.
It's both, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It looks it's a both. So that said, I'm going to switch on next demo, which is let me show that. So next demo is actually about transforming data using mapping data flows in Azure Data Factory. We may not have enough time to do that, but I will go through that anyway in a high overview, which actually shows the steps how you make the data transformation. And in this demo, what happens actually is ADF is used, and we create a pipeline that copies and transforms data from Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 to another source in Azure Data Lake Storage. We are using here sample data from movies which came out in US. It's about movies that came out in US between 1910 and 2000 to find the average rating for comedy movies. Okay, and it's actually using tomato meter. What is tomato meter? It's about movies, and you can read more about that in this link if you are a movie, if you like watching movies. But generally speaking, tomato meter is a way how the movies are rated. Okay, and it's a famous kind of thing to do. So I will switch back to our demo mode, and this time I'm going to switch to another data factory that I called data. Let me close this for now. So we have another data pipeline here that has two data sets and data flow, transform movies. So when I open the pipeline, we can see that we have one transformation movie pipeline. I'm going to expand that. And here, as you may see, we have these 4 steps, right? So we have a source from where we are getting the data. Then we are filtering that by year. Then we are aggregating aggregating the rating of that movies who have who have the genre of comedy, and then we get the results of that aggregation. Okay, that's what we do. In other words, once we run, just to show you the source data, how it looks like, I have it ready here. Let me open that. It's a movies DB, and you can get that from the repository, from my GitHub repository. Just reach out to me, please. So this is the basically what we have in the repository. We have the movie. Oh, let me make it bigger here. Let me see if it works. Yeah, we have basically title of the movie. Then we have year, rating, and tomato and Rotten Tomato rating on the right. Okay, and we have the genre, of course, in the middle. Let me make it smaller again. So as you see here, it's genre, it's year, rating, Rotten Tomato. So this is the source data. What I did, I basically loaded the source data into the data lake storage, Azure Data Lake, and you can it's loaded. Let me see where it is. Here it is. So basically, this is the movies DB CSV that I loaded into the this data lake, and the output is going to appear under this folder once I run the pipeline. So once I switch to the pipeline, just to describe, first I created the source from where I'm retrieving that file. Then I click on this plus sign, I put the filter on years. And once the filter is there, I clicked and added the aggregation based on the based on the rating and comedy genre, and then there's a sync. But in order to run this pipeline on a debug mode, we need to make sure that this toggle is switched on. This is very important so that you can see some preview of data. And while looking at the preview of data, you need to define which Azure integration runtime you want to actually initiate. I have two of them here. I'm going to use the smaller cluster, which has actually more cores than the regular one. And let's initiate this cluster. So once this green, we can look into the preview of data on each step, and we can actually validate them and run the pipeline. Okay. At the end of this pipeline, when it runs, it will go through all the movies that were generated between 1910 and 2000. It will filter out them by year and only aggregate the ones that have genre of comedy and get their average rating. And then it will show the results in sync. It will sync into the data set and files that are written into the Azure Data Lake storage. Okay, Azure Data Lake store. Okay, while it's going on here, it's going to take a minute or two. I want you, while it is spinning, we can look into the repository from where you can get the code and connect and look at it. So this is my GitHub repository where I have two where I have like two repos that you can look into. The ADF sample repo is actually has that sample data copy pipeline that I first showed you in demo one, and second demo actually has this second mapping flow on the second repository that is created under my GitHub account. All right, so you can get it from there. So now I'm going back to the ADF flow. It's still warming up. It's spinning those Spark clusters. It takes usually a minute or two, so it's usual way how it works. Okay, meanwhile, let's check any questions or anything. Do you have any questions, Lisa, in the comments or so?
No more questions
Okay.
so far, but everyone's saying that it's been a great presentation, and I agree. This has been so well put together.
Actually, before going further, I want to give all the people who joined a little bit guide about what they can use, and I put that in our chat. It's in comments. It's a Microsoft Docs MS Learn about how you can get started to learn about ADF, Azure Data Factory, and Azure Synapse Analytics. Okay, Synapse databases, because they are very and in the future, I wouldn't be surprised if ADF is going to be part of Synapse, Azure Synapse, because there's a tight integration between them, or invisible integration, I would say. So if somebody wants to get up to date, kind of learn about this technology and deep dive into them, they can start learning from that resources. You can share them on the YouTube channel if you want.
Yeah, awesome. I've just shared those now, and we will see if we can get them uploaded into the notes when the session is published as well.
Yeah, while this cluster is still running, and you may see it from here, it's still rotating. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you final result that actually you should see once this cluster is running, once this pipeline, running and filtering the data and then aggregating them. So final result here in my, I'm going to go to here it is. So in output file here, final result should be this the files that you see and what they represent, right? So what it is, why I'm showing this. So this is the, if you open them, this is the output on each year that had any comedy. For example, for the year 1984, which is in line with between 1910 and 2000, it had basically some comedy movies, and average rating for that comedy movies was 6.31 something, as you may see here, right? So this is the for the year 1984. uh, for the different year, if I close this and open something else, any other file, we'll see that it should have similar. It should have two columns, which is year and average comedy rating. Here it is, right? And year. So for year 1962, it looks like the rating, average rating for comedy genre movies was 5.625. Okay, so that's what we should expect, as an output from our data transformation pipeline. Okay, once it's formed up, succeeded, and works. And let me go back and look at it. It's still warming up now. But no, here it is. It's finally here. So I'm going to go to the data preview to show you the things that I just mentioned. So under movies, right here, once it's connected, if I click on data preview and click on refresh, it will take a little bit of time. But what it would bring raw data from the Azure Data Lake Gen 2, where we should see title, we should see the rating, we should see tomato rating, and we should see the year in addition to that. So while it is fetching the data, uh, yeah, it takes usually some time. Yeah, here it is. So we see the movies. Okay, we have a title, we have genre, we have year, we have rating on the right, and we have Rotten Tomato rating here. Okay, all as expected. So here's the filter. Filter is expression that we need to put, and you may see it here. It's filtering between 1910 and 2000 with the genre of comedy. Okay. And once this filtered with the year, when we look at data preview, we should see actually less data, but 6 in total. So there will be 6 total columns and the rows that are corresponding to our filter. Okay. Here it is. So all of them should have at least genre category. As you may see, they are all comedy genre. And here are the movies, their titles, ratings, and everything. And next step is actually aggregating all those data into the in order to get their average rating. Okay, average rating per year for the given year. So that's what happens in this step, and we will see that appear just in few seconds in data preview mode. And remember, data preview mode will only work once you activate data flow debug. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see this. And here it is, as promised, we have a year and average rating for all the comedy genre movies for the given year. And then this data on the thing, it's actually getting outputted as 2 columns, and it's getting outputted to another location in data lake storage gen 2, and this is the output. And that's pretty much it. This is the transform movies data flow that we created, and that's what it is doing. And all this is under the data flow umbrella that I call it, and you can look at here. So if you want to look at the monitoring, you can still click on monitor and look that these are the debug mode runs that we just ran actually. And if there's any triggers, they will appear here. In our case, we didn't create any trigger. All right. So that's it, folk, for showing this transformation demo. And next is what we have covered. We covered the ADF concepts. We looked into pipelines and activities. We looked into linked services, data sets, execution monitoring, triggers, and data flows. And if you have any questions, please put them in comment. We'll wait for next couple minutes, and then we'll close the session. This is the, if you want to get uh, in touch with me, you are more than welcome to connect with me on my LinkedIn or tweet on Twitter, and as well as check out my Git repository. All right, that's all on my end for today. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Ilhan. And we also want to give a shout out to your blog. I checked that out while you were speaking, and that's great. So that's the Cloud Marathoner.
Yes.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Why did you decide on that name for your blog?
Yes. So basically, the Cloud Marathoner, it's a blog name because learning about cloud, learning about how you can do is a long process. It's not something that can happen overnight. So you need to have really kind of interest and go further as much as you can, while understanding that it's not a sprint. You can't
Mm-hmm.
achieve in couple days or couple weeks, even the months. It's something
Mm-hmm.
that will take you years, and you need to enjoy the process. You need to enjoy learning the journey and seeing the benefits. And most importantly, while you are in that journey, how you can help the community, how
Mm-hmm.
you can empower the people who are not as lucky as you are to have this access to the resources, have
Yeah.
internet at home, and being able to learn, share, and plus benefit from all this knowledge. That's why I'm also for the minority community, and as well as women in tech,
Yeah.
I'm also planning to use that fundraising to get them at least 10 vouchers this year, exam vouchers, mostly in Azure, and then
Amazing.
help them in their journey.
Yeah, I think I love that. You're right. It's a long journey in cloud, and I think it's almost a never-ending one. You should get comfortable with not knowing everything.
Yes.
And you're very right. You need to enjoy the process. It's not necessarily about the finish line. And I love that. Doing fundraising to get certification vouchers. That's an amazing idea. We are hoping to have, in fact, we will have at our Cloud Lunch and Learn Marathon in May, we will have a Cloud Skills Challenge. We will be giving away vouchers for certifications. Because we really want to enable people across the world who, like you say, potentially do not have the luxuries that we do with the access to these resources. The Azure certification vouchers can be quite expensive for some people, and
Yes.
definitely from some countries. So yes, we definitely want to share the learning, share the resources, and give people a chance to do more in this space, because at the end of the day, technology depends on the people who are creating it, and it
Yes.
depends on us having a diverse bunch of people working on it if it's going to achieve all that it can do to help us as a human race on this planet. Anyway, that was a little bit deep for the end of the session, but I like it. Thanks to everyone who joined us this evening. Thanks for all your chat. There was some chat in the during the live of people getting to know each other and sharing their journeys and why they're using Azure, and I loved that. Quick reminder: Cloud Launch and Learn Marathon, 13th of May, 24 hours, global event, multiple language tracks. Call for speakers is open. It closes in a week. Closes on the 31st of March. So if you would like to submit a session, either a recorded or a live session, please check out our website, cloudlunchandlearn.com/marathon, and you can read all about it there. But big thank you, Elle. That was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you
What a
for having me, and it was great ending. Meaning, this upcoming Cloud Launch and Learn Marathon. It's another beginning. I look at that as a beginning. So be part of this beginning. I'm going to be there. I hope you will all be there. Thank you.
awesome. Thanks, everyone. See you
Thank you.
later. Bye
Bye.
bye.